This week we're going to start on the Swamp region, which is the first new region in the game since the desert. I managed to get lots of stuff done in the game since the original desert, but now it's time to get some actual content in the game again. Annoyingly though, this region did have a few different things in it, so it is sort of still a work in progress. This is a game about exploration and discovery in a large, procedurally generated, high fantasy world. You discover things, collect items, kill monsters. It's essentially trying to distill the feeling of playing a big game like Skyrim down into a gameplay loop that would fit quite well onto a mobile device. And I also tagged Alpha Release 12 this week, which you can download from the game's GitHub releases page if you feel so inclined. The Swamp Biome had been on my list for quite a while, but I just sort of ended up putting it off because there were more important things to work on. Now, I started by just collecting some reference material as you're meant to do. I wanted something with lots of obvious pools of water, some really crusty trees covered with green things, and ideally some interesting swamp places. Remember, this is a game about finding stuff, and a region without any region-specific locations is just going to be really boring. Although one thing I will point out is this is all stuff going in the open source base, so I would want to keep my best ideas for the actual game. No offense. So one of the first things I started modeling was the trees for the swamp. I only ended up making 2 because I just kind of wanted to get to grips with how it would actually look if I put it into the actual game. And bearing in mind that I need to figure out things like color palette, aesthetics, and just generally how it's going to look. There's going to be other foliage in the swamp as well. I can see it. It's going to need to be quite overgrown, but I'm going to need to figure out how to do that best with the memory profile that I'm going to have, because remember, this has to run on a mobile device, so frame rate is quite important. So with those models made, I went on to try and define the region in code. Now this is kind of where some of my technical problems started, because I realised that this code to place biomes and stuff hadn't been touched in a long time, and it was fundamentally disgusting. Firstly, there was a problem with my color palette tool where it was just giving me the wrong color ID, and it took me a long time to actually realise that and resolve it. And that just meant all of the voxels when I started to place the region were just completely wrong. Secondly, I had to figure out how to define a new voxel type, because remember, I hadn't touched this code in a long time. And a big part of the problem was that all of this stuff still lived in C++. And I've had quite a concerted effort recently to move as much as I can for the map gen out of C++ and into Skrill, where it can still be efficient. And as this is content-specific work, it really should be more flexible and live in scripts. So I ended up redesigning my voxel definition system so everything's nice and organized in a single file, rather than scattered around a few different ones like it was before. It's much cleaner now, but it did take me some time to reorganize it as well. This also takes advantage of the flexible enum system, so things like mods can designate their own types of ground voxel. And by doing it this way, I don't need to recompile the C++ code every time I want to change a voxel color, which is great if I'm going to be playing around with color palettes. Now, part of the goal for the swamp region was for it to be nice and flat and have lots of puddles in it. I averaged out the height for the area, although made sure to include a wide transition from regular terrain to the swampy plains, using my distance gradient from a few weeks ago. I also used a Perlin noise algorithm to generate a dip value in certain places for the swampy lakes. I had to tweak it a bit to get the sort of thing I was looking for, but honestly, it actually looked decent without too much effort. I just had to be sure to draw big enough regions of water, because if it got too grainy, it would just start to look kind of bad. In the end, the trees ended up looking okay when they were placed too, but there are some problems because I need to ensure they always get placed on land, rather than potentially shooting out over the water. Part of the problem is that they're just bigger than what the other type of trees were, so they are likely to do that. So realistically, what I'm probably going to do is just modify the altitude a bit, because I can actually do that now because I rewrote some of the code base, and you can be damn sure that I'm going to use it to 100% that I possibly can. And also, I think it would look cool if I make the trees more pronounced. I think part of my plan as well is to have some maybe smaller trees kind of around the area, so the bigger trees can kind of be deeper into the swamp, and smaller, more spindly trees can be on the outside, but that'll be for next week. And to be honest, these trees are big enough now that they're going to need to have their own collision radius at some point. So now, with the swamp biome looking like this, I decided the next thing that needed some work was the water. Actually, all of the water in land was just sort of left in quite a sorry state when I last updated the water effect, so it would be good to be able to change it. The first thing I wanted to fix was the wave animation, because it was animating at exactly the same speed as the ocean wave, and it just looked completely wrong for what is essentially a lake. This is really just a universal animation across the entire water plane, so it did need some way to change that in the shader. However, what made this kind of difficult was I couldn't really do that with a texture, because these things need to be found in the vertex shader. And also, I had plans to start generating the mesh on the CPU anyway, because a couple of weeks ago I was dealing with this problem, which was a graphical glitch caused by the mesh just going in places it shouldn't be. So being able to generate my own mesh would give me a lot more flexibility. and I decided it would be best to just do that here anyway. This would mean that I could start to pack some extra data into the vertices by using something like the y-axis, which is not actually used for the mesh at all, and I'd be able to do things like pass in animation values to get the animation for the water to animate at a different speed. And in future, that might allow me to do lots of other interesting things with the animation as well, but for right now, I'm just using it for the mesh animation. Now, I managed to get this almost entirely done. However, the hole punching algorithm that actually AI wrote for me isn't quite working as I expect it to yet. It is working well enough to fix the outline issue from the other week though, which actually I'm quite pleased with. But the problem is that it still needs some work. Notably that you might still manage to see a hole in the region if the hole that you're punching is too close to the side. So those were the main things this week. There are some other stuff. So I disabled the ability to place rivers for the entire swamp region. It just doesn't really make any sense having a river going through the swamp, does it? I've now got a radius function to average around certain places rather than necessarily just a rectangle. This is used mostly for the dust mite nest and it just looks way better now compared to what it looked like before. I fixed a crash in the Android app, which had been there for a while, it turns out, due to how I was passing tile data for places. So remember that with Android you've got to do like a really specific thing to get the assets, so I've got to do my specific like file system approach to it, and I just wasn't doing that for some of the native code. So when I started placing places and averaging the tile array and stuff like that, it just totally broke the Android build, annoyingly. So I had to fix that before I did release 11. So that was all the main stuff for this week. Next week I'm planning to just carry on with the Swamp Biome. It's kind of a strange one because I go into this like wanting to work on some content thing, and then I always end up finding some technical work that needs doing on the side. But I also fully believe that when I get into like the late stage of this game, it'll just be like bang, 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 adding more regions, adding more content, that sort of thing, because all of the technical base will be in place. I know I've been saying that for a while, but it is getting there. Like I can see it's getting there. The game is much more stable than it used to be. Like all the automated testing is coming in really well at the moment. It's always catching problems with it. And you know, like all the problems I fixed the other week, it's kind of all coming to a head. So it's good to see it. It's a much more stable project than really it's ever been before. And I can see where it's going. It's good. I like that. Let me just adjust my hair for the final shot. Right, well, we got a lot done this week, and I'm looking forward to having a productive week next week as well. So, I'll see you there.